Will there be massive escalation in the days and weeks ahead, or will there be massive de-escalation in the times ahead? What happens next is the biggest question. The extent of damage to Iran's nuclear weapons dream. Is that dream dead, as US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says? There are many, many questions. What will Iran do next? Israel, incidentally, is already retaliating. Israel has targeted multiple air bases and nuclear sites in Iran, including the one in Bushehr just hours earlier. Joining me on this special broadcast is Daler Mohammed. He's a journalist and a political analyst who joins us from Erbil city in Kurdistan region of Iraq. Lieutenant General KJS Dhillon, former Director General of Defense Intelligence Agency, joins me on this special broadcast. Raymond Vickery is a senior associate chair of the US-India Policy Institute, joins us from the United States of America. Professor Brahma Chilani, one of India's best respected strategic affairs analysts, joins me on this show. Also with me on this special broadcast is Naved Mohibi, an Iranian analyst, Iranian-American, former political prisoner, joins us on this special broadcast. And I want to begin by asking you, Naved Mohibi, is Iran's nuclear dream dead, as Pete Hegseth puts it? Okay, give me a moment as we reestablish that link. Professor Raymond Vickery, your appreciation. Is there merit in Pete Hegseth saying Iran's nuclear dream is dead?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's certainly set back here. But the problem is that we've moved from the logic of peace to the logic of war. Instead of trying to have a rule of law and a semblance of order, what we've done is move to might makes right. And this is unfortunate. Is Iran's nuclear dream over? No, it is not over. There is some doubt as to exactly what the damage has been. It's certainly been set back. But when you move to the logic of war, the logic of retaliation takes over, and people's dreams of military solutions are put on the table.
Okay, General Dhillon, your assessment, bomb damage assessment, General Dan Kane, his impression was tremendous damage, especially at Fordo. When you combine the damage at Fordo, Isfahan and Natanz, is this a setback or is the dream dead for now, as Pete Hegseth puts it?
Gaurav, good evening to you. Good evening to the fellow panelists and your viewers. Gaurav, the amount of, the explosives which has been delivered on the target, especially Fordo, and amount of precision with which it has been delivered. We saw those 3 holes at 2 different locations. It seems the damage would have been tremendous. However, as a military man, unless the post-strike damage assessment confirms the damage could well have been only to the peripherals. Unless the damage is to the heart of the program, it is very difficult at this stage to confirm or otherwise whether the dream is dead, delayed, or not touched at all. But at this time, I think it's fair enough to say it has definitely been put behind by about a decade plus, if not more.
Been put behind by a decade plus is significant advantage Israel and the United States of America if Iran's nuclear weapons dream has been delayed by a year. Daler Mohammed joins us from Erbil city, Kurdistan region of Iraq. Your assessment of what the United States and Israel have been able to achieve in the past 24 hours, and especially the United States with launching 125 fighter jets and especially the B-2 bombers, with the GBU-57 striking Fordo?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Actually, the U.S. strike on nuclear sites in Iran will only postpone the Iranian nuclear program for maybe a year or 6 months, if work resumed on these sites. However, this military operation will not kill the dream of obtaining the dream of uranium enrichment, the dream for having a nuclear power, because as we've been hearing, the supreme leader of Iran repeatedly stated that it's a legal and natural right of Iran's people to have nuclear power, not necessary for military purposes, but mostly for peaceful purposes. So as long as Iran is there, the Iranian regime is there, there will always be a possibility that this nuclear enrichment restart again, because they have been confirming and reaffirming that they're legal, and enriching uranium on the ground in Iran is unnegotiable. So they do not negotiate about that. They do not negotiate it
Dr.
at all.
Kinvraj Jahangir, Director and Professor, Center for Israel Studies at the OP Jindal Global University, also joins me on this broadcast. Dr. Jahangir, your assessment of the damage the US has been able to inflict, immediate and if long term.
Namaskar. Well, this has been a very, very, let's say, devastating event for the Iranian, regime. We would know the damage not late. I think in some days it should be reported by some independent agencies what actually transpired. But the amount of explosive, earlier it was considered that 2 buster bunkers will be enough, but they used something like 14 to 16. So I think Americans went with all the, let's say, extra, mile and did what they wanted to do. And Trump really carried a lot of deceptive tactics. Earlier, when the negotiations ended abruptly and Israel attacked, everybody accused him of deceiving Iranians and preparing Israelis to attack. But this time, when he clearly came up and said, I'm giving 2 weeks to this matter, and then suddenly this happened last night, it was really a shocking thing. What happened in Tel Aviv today?
Okay.
So out of the 9 nights, last night was a night that I woke up and I said, wow, there was no siren. So last night was exceptionally a night. There wasn't any siren at any point of time. And around 8 o'clock, there was an alert and a siren. Everybody went in. And apparently Iran launched one of its strongest ballistic missiles all over Israel. Tel Aviv received something like 5. All over the country received around 40. And it landed just next to the Tel Aviv University where I am with my students. The whole neighborhood got completely, let's say, devastated. However, nobody lost life. And this goes to the great credit of the Israeli alert system and the sheltering. This is really revealing about Israeli domestic strength. Otherwise, this missile could have killed more than a few hundreds.
Using a
had there been
hypersonic
alert
missile,
on time.
Professor, as you very rightly point out, they were still able to penetrate through layers and layers of air defense system that Israel has in place. Professor Brahmachelani, your appreciation of the US strikes and its impact.
Trump has dragged the US into yet another Middle East war by gambling his presidency on conflict with Iran. He has broken the promise that he made on January 20th when he was sworn in as president for a second time. In his inauguration speech, he had said that his legacy would be that of a peacemaker. Now, Trump has pulled the US into a war with Iran that could trigger more dangerous escalations. It's very unlikely that Iran will capitulate the way Trump has demanded. He has demanded that Tehran accept peace on US terms or face greater devastation. So this is going to continue for a while. It might entangle the US more deeply in the Middle East. The likely winners from greater US entanglement are going to be China and Russia. China, no doubt, will be cheering the US involvement in yet another war. The more wars US wages, the more likely it will sap its strength. In fact, it was America's long wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere that paved the way for China's dramatic rise. And if you look at the Ukraine war, this proxy war between the US and Russia, there's been only one winner, China.
Yes.
As far as Russia is concerned, Russia has not come to the aid of Iran, as many had expected that it would actually provide some assistance to Iran. When Russia was in the early stages of the Ukrainian invasion, when Russia was facing the Western onslaught, heavy weaponry being supplied to Ukraine, it was Iran that came to Russia's help by supplying Shahed 131 and Shahed 136 kamikaze drones, which proved very useful for Russia in that stage of the war. But now, as Iran depletes its own drone and missile stockpiles, Russia is offering only rhetorical condemnation of Israel's attack or of Trump's attack. But I think for India, what's happening carries grave implications.
Okay.
First, we should not forget that since the day Israel launched its war on Iran, India's oil import bill has gone up by millions of dollars per day, because the international oil price has steadily risen since the Israeli attack
Sir,
on
I'll
Iran.
just come to that point in a moment, because I want to talk about what will happen if the Strait of Hormuz is shut down. But for the moment, I want to stay on the point of the bunker busters being used and is Iran's nuclear program dead for good, delayed by a year or more. And, Naved Mohibi, an Iranian analyst and Iranian American former political prisoner, joins us on the broadcast. And Naved Mohibi, your appreciation, is this nuclear weapons program dead or just delayed, and may just now be short-circuited to put together a bomb much faster than earlier?
Thank you for having me on. Just this morning, I was talking to a lot of Iranians inside the country, and they were all telling me the same thing, that this regime has spent over 20 years dragging Iran into some of the world's worst sanctions, trades, and isolation, and perhaps spent more than $1 trillion into its nuclear program. And in just 1 week, or perhaps one night, the US strikes wiped them all out. So this is something that many Iranians inside the country are thinking. And I think that the president has put forward a very generous offer on the table. But I think that the Islamic Republic regime is not interested in any kind of compromise. Let's not forget that this is a revisionist regime that is at odds with the international community. They're not interested in the well-being of Iranian people. They don't care about all these years of sanctions, and they were instead interested in Khamenei's ideological war in the Middle East. But at the same time, I think that yes, the regime has experienced a devastating blow to its nuclear size, as we are hearing, but it's developing, and we need to hear more assessment from governments. But I think that bombing the nuclear sites alone won't solve the problem. And the reason is that, yes, it might slow things down. It may delay Iranian nuclear program for maybe 6 months, 2 years, or 3 years. But the problem is that they can rebuild it in a couple of years.
Okay.
And plus,
Unless it's very difficult for them to do so, or politically there are no gains. Raymond Vickery, if I could bring you once again before I bring in Sandeep Unnithan into this conversation as we reestablish that link with him. Raymond Vickery, will Iran, as some political leaders in Iran are saying that their parliament has approved shutting down the Hormuz Strait, the Strait of Hormuz, will that be their next step? And if they do, will the crisis just magnify?
Well, I'm afraid that's the logic of war, that you do not try to obtain peace rationally. You don't try to obtain prosperity through peaceful means. What you do is retaliate. So I think that that certainly is in the cards. The idea that there will be no retaliation, while one hopes that that would be the case, I would hope, and I think most Americans hope, there won't be any retaliation, and that the things that President Trump is saying will come true. However, the probabilities are not in favor of that. As has been said, the many years and billions, trillions of dollars investment, the ideological bent of the leader all indicate that they will extend the logic of war, and that is retaliation. So I think that Hormuz being shut down is certainly very much in the cards.
So will the retaliation be kinetic or non-kinetic beyond Israel? Because kinetic response, Daler Mohammed, has already started kinetic response against Israel, and it does appear to be intense, at least initially.
Of course, kinetic response will be
Daler Mohammed, please.
Across the board.
Can you repeat the question, please? What do you mean by what types of response did you mention?
Whether more missiles will be launched, whether more force will be used, or will it be non-kinetic means in terms of closing down the Strait of Hormuz?
Look, actually, it's going to be the President Trump. Just 1 hour ago, the U.S. Defense Minister Peter Hughes, they made it clear it would be a very bad idea for the Iranian regime to retaliate, because the consequences will be very bad. They made it very, very clear and very firm that the U.S. will respond very powerfully and very strongly to any retaliation from the Iranian side. And regarding your question about closing down the Hormuz Strait, that would really be really bad idea, because look, any Iranian response to any U.S. bases in the Middle East, in the neighboring countries, in the Arab countries that are right now on very high alarm for they expect Iranian retaliation. But any response, any retaliation action by the Iranian regime will be deadly, will end up ending the regime in Iran, because this is President Trump. This is not Biden. This is not Obama. This is President Trump. And you know, President Trump, doesn't play.
Sandeep, how do you see Iran respond beyond the missile strikes that have been carried out against Israel right now, and the kind of capabilities Iran still has?
Well, Gaurav, the ball is in Iran's court, or should I say the bomb is in Iran's court now. It's up to the leadership to decide what they need to do. And there are a raft of options before the leadership of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. We've discussed it on your show over the last few days. And one of them seems to be the shutting down of the Straits of Hormuz. Now, as you mentioned, the Straits of Hormuz are very critical to world energy supplies. Nearly a fifth of world energy passes through those straits. It is just 33 kilometers at its narrowest, the straits that link the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman. 33 kilometers is less than the distance between Gurugram and Noida, Gaurav. That's how narrow that straits are. And Iran has a huge amount of capability. They have sea mines, they have the Revolutionary Guard gunboats, they have anti-ship ballistic missiles. This is something that they have been gaming for the last few decades. You know, shutting down the Strait of Hormuz would be something which they would do if they were facing an existential crisis. That is option number one. The second option, of course, is targeting US air bases in and around West Asia. There are 8 permanent bases there with something like 40 to 50,000 servicemen. Some of those bases we're given to understand, which are in the front line, have been, depopulated. The personnel have been moved out, fighter aircraft have been moved out, fearing this possibility that Iran could strike at them. There is, of course, the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, Gaurav. That's a very big target. That's again just about 20 or 30 kilometers away from Iranian shore. So literally there's a raft of options before Iran, Gaurav, but every option carries with it the risk of escalating this conflict. And the United States, as one of our panelists mentioned, it is not Biden, it is not Clinton, it is Donald Trump, and they will be forced to respond in a way that would be extremely, extremely detrimental to Iran's, remaining missile arsenal.
General Dhillon, before I bring in...
They're supposed to have something like 50% of their ballistic missiles that are still left despite the hammering from Israel. But further action could actually not only denuclearize Iran, Gaurav, it could demilitarize Iran as well.
But is it so easy to demilitarize a powerful country like Iran? General Dhillon, your appreciation, you've studied Iran closely. Will Iran want to escalate, close down the Hormuz Strait, use kinetic options, or will it seek to de-escalate beyond symbolic attacks?
Gaurav, I've seen the Strait of Hormuz on ground from the Omanian side. Northern side is Iran and southern side is Oman. So the 33 kilometers at the narrowest is divided half and half between Oman and Iran as their waters. So, sort of blocking the Strait of Hormuz by laying mines or by, patrol boats and things like that is going to be challenged very, very badly by the world community. And Iran, with the type of offer which President Trump has given for peace, I think it's not an honorable exit for Iran. You have to give an honorable exit to a country like Iran if you want peace. Now, to make a statement that you come to the table and we'll discuss peace when you hit them very hard, I think there is a dichotomy here. And like as the other panelists said, it's not Obama, it's not Biden, it's Trump. So both sides have got very hardened stances and very hardened reputations to protect. It would be very good in overall interest of the region and the world and the economy per se that some sensible countries get in and get them both onto the table with their honor being intact.
Okay.
That is very important aspect in this region. The honorable exit is a very, very must.
And there is clearly no honorable exit right now. There is no honor when 3 of your biggest nuclear sites have been bombed by the United States of America using not just the B-2 but 125 fighter jets in all. But Professor Brahmachalani, you anticipate massive military escalation, kinetic escalation or non-kinetic escalation in the days ahead, because the US also has its 5th Fleet in Bahrain. In case Iran were to block the Strait of Hormuz, wouldn't the 5th Fleet in Bahrain come into action?
First, Gaurav, one basic fact is being obscured in the discourse. The 3 Iranian nuclear sites that have been bombed by the US, each of them was under IAEA safeguards.
Yes.
The IAEA, a day before Israel launched its attack, released a report saying that it has its inspections have revealed no undeclared Iranian nuclear weapons program. And the US intelligence also, until a day before Trump launched his bombing campaign against Iran, repeated its early assessment that Iran was not close to building a nuclear weapon. Given that background, and given the fact that there was no immediate Iranian threat to the US, what Trump has done not only undermines the authority and inspection regime of the IAEA, it also violates international law, including the UN Charter. Now, in terms of what comes next, Gaurav, if you look at recent US interventions, regime change interventions or regime change efforts, where the US succeeded, Iraq and Libya, that required direct US military intervention.
Yes.
And we know the result of such direct US military intervention. In each case, that country became a failed state. And Libya still today is a failed state, thanks to the US-led intervention. The second way the US has tried regime change is through covert operations. Syria was an example. From 2011 onwards, under President Barack Obama and continued by Biden to some extent, they sought to effect regime change in Damascus by letting the CIA lead the effort. That bore no fruit. Only when they ceased regime change operations in Syria, only then forces within Syria destabilized the Assad regime, and then there was a regime change. So the only way you can actually bring about regime change, or you can demilitarize Iran, is by sending ground forces into Iran. That's the only way. You cannot wage an air war and demilitarize Iran. You cannot wage an air war and ensure that Iran will not reconstitute its nuclear program. The fact is that you cannot destroy the know-how in Iran. And as Israel's own national security advisor has admitted on Israeli television, that Iran's nuclear program cannot be destroyed by military means alone.
It has to be done politically, it has to be done diplomatically, and very clearly all signs are Iran will not trust any American intervention or any global intervention at this stage. The way United Nations looks so weak and powerless, IAEA looks so weak and powerless, the manner in which military operations are being carried out. But Dr. Jangid, in your appreciation, merit in Iran's criticism, look at the manner in which these airstrikes were carried out in violation of all international rules and law, and will Iran be well within its rights if it were to block the Strait of Hormuz? And that would cause great global distress?
It is true that Iran does have this merit, and actually Iran had much, better merit going nuclear like India did against American wishes and sanctions. Let's, Iranian vocabulary against NPT and the nuclear apartheid is exactly what India has been using. So yes, Iran does have a lot of, solidarity on that count. However, the problem with the Iranian regime is, unlike India, that went nuclear against the American hegemony, Iran added another objective to its foreign policy, which is to negate the Israeli state, to negate the two-state solution, and to liberate the whole of Jerusalem from the Jews. Now, that's a very ideological and a very openly declared war against a very powerful state in the region. So this hostility that Iranian regime, went on since 1979, in a way killed its victim card. And by the way, Iran has been involved in the war with Israel from October 2023.
Yes.
Iran was party to the October 7th, solidarity with Hamas, but Iran also allowed Hezbollah to attack Israel from the north for almost a year and a half, till Israelis could get back to north. Israel couldn't really regain its own territory. So Iran doesn't really have the victim card on all fronts. It can have a victim card on the nuclearization and its sovereignty and in the international law. But then, as somebody said, Iran doesn't respect many of the international laws by its own ideological agendas.
I want to bring in Naveed Mohibi on the aspect of what Israel may do next, because Israel is already bombing Iran even as we speak. It's targeting an airbase, it's targeting a nuclear site, and it's threatening to target multiple launch sites of missiles right now. So Naveed Mohibi, how long can Iran continue to take on Israel with the kind of capabilities it still has, sir?
Well, Israel military said that they have other goals in Iran and they will continue their strike until they can contain the Iranian regime. But I think that the Iranian regime doesn't have so much cards left to play with. The only thing that they have left, and they're running out of it, is ballistic missiles. And all these threats of closing down the Strait of Hormuz, I think that that's not realistic. basically the skies of Iran are being controlled by Israel and the United States, as President Trump also said that. So I think there's no way for them that they can have the capability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz when they don't have control over their skies. Khamenei is basically hiding in a bunker, and he's nowhere to be found. Top military sites and top military leaders, they're all eliminated. And I think that the Iranian regime at this point is in complete disarray. Decision-making is very hard for them, and their threat of retaliation is not going to be anything more than symbolic attacks. Let's not forget that a few years ago, when U.S. government killed Qasem Soleimani, when they were the Iranian regime was preparing for the attack against U.S. bases in Iraq, they gave a 1-hour heads up to U.S. government because they didn't want to anger President Trump at that time, and the regime understand that President Trump is not Obama, is not Biden, and he is going to retaliate, and he's not going to take defeat from the Iranian regime.
Fair enough. So what will Iran do next? Because there are many who are saying that a regime change may just be aim plus for Israel. Taking out the nuclear weapons program was the aim. Taking out the ballistic missiles was the aim.
Yeah.
To a very large extent, both those aims have been met. Not entirely, but to a large extent. And I'll come to Sandeep in just a moment. But is regime change aim plus? The US and Israeli strikes, they're pounding Iran's nuclear backbone. The big question is, where is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei right now? Remember what Donald Trump said? He knows where he's hiding. He can't take him out, but this is not the time to do so. So a forensic video analysis by India Today's open source intelligence and information team raises a new chilling question. Where is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei? Where is he hiding? Is the regime actually preparing for who after Khamenei? We bring you more in this report.
He is Iran's most powerful man, and now it's most endangered. With the United States and Israeli strikes crippling Iran's military and nuclear command, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has disappeared from public view. No grand chambers, no familiar backdrop. The Supreme Leader, who faces possible US and Israeli assassination bid, may be in hiding and possibly in a bunker. India Today's forensic analysis shows a dramatic drop in video quality of Khamenei's public addresses. On June 4th, Khamenei's video had sharp visuals, studio sound. But cut to June 18th, the bitrate plunges from 892 to mere 256 kbps. Audio crashes to 2.4 kbps. Experts say this isn't technical, it's tactical. Sources say Khamenei has been moved to an underground bunker in Lavizian, northeastern Tehran. Hunted, hiding, and preparing. Facing the threat of assassination, Khamenei has handed the Assembly of Experts a sealed shortlist of 3 clerics to replace him if he's killed. His son, Mojtaba, is however not on the list. Meanwhile, from exile, Iran's crown prince Reza Pahlavi broke his silence, asking Khamenei to quit. Claiming his regime has failed, Pahlavi added that Iran deserves peace and a new beginning. Call for regime change shriller, the war wider, and the supreme leader hiding behind curtains and compressed code. This is a regime on the edge, and for Iran, the next strike could change everything. Bureau Report, India Today.
Will regime change operations be aim plus? And Sandeep, is this next on the cards when it comes to both Israel and the United States of America? Are they moving in tandem, even though that's not the declared aim or aim plus?
Well, Gaurav, regime change is something that they never set out to do when this whole operation began. It's just one of those inadvertent, mission creeps that seem to have entered this whole game as the bombing went on, and Israeli aircraft established air superiority over Iranian airspace. It led to the belief that you could possibly do a regime change as well, given the fact that there was no opposition to you and there was a lot of discontent on the ground. But that said, Pranay, Gaurav, it's not very easy to change a regime like Iran. Gulf Storm, the Desert Storm 2, that's in 2003 when they invaded Saddam Hussein's Iraq. There were something like 160,000 allied troops there. That's a lot of soldiers, and that Iraq had a formidable army, and in Iran you have three armies. You have the regular Iranian army, you have the Revolutionary Guards, and you have the Basij, the volunteers. So this regime has been there for 45 years. It's very deeply entrenched. It's fought back. It's survived this 8-year war with Saddam Hussein. It's very difficult to change a regime from the air, as I've said on
it's
your
a
shows
resilient
many times in the
system,
past.
a resilient
So that would
system
be
that's
just
always been able to
something
fight
that would
back and hit harder. But how much capability, Sandeep, do they have to continue to hit back? The number of missiles and the number of launchers that they still have. Even today, even as we speak, Israel was bombing an airbase, a missile launch site, and a nuclear facility in Iran.
Well, absolutely, Gaurav. Iran is, made up for its lack of an air force. It's not had any serious air force since 1979. Its air force is all creaky. The aircraft are all dating back from the 70s. They've just bought 2 or 3 squadrons since then. It has focused its entire might on ballistic missiles, on cruise missiles, on drones. So they are actually very good at making ballistic missiles of all kinds. And they are one of only 5 countries in the world which have hypersonic ballistic missiles, very fast-moving hypersonic glide vehicles, which approach at a terminal speed of over Mach 10, 10 times the speed of sound, going up to 15 times the speed of sound. So they focused all their military capabilities on building this ballistic missile arsenal with TELs, the transporter erector launchers, which is what Israel was very cleverly targeting in the first few opening days of the conflict. But the assessments are that Iran had something like 3,000 ballistic missiles in about 10 or 12 different types. These are US assessments. And even looking at the number of missiles that have been fired over the last couple of days, 8 days, something like 100, 150 ballistic missiles have been fired until now, Gaurav. There's a lot more ballistic missiles that Iran has in its arsenal. It's possible that the TELs, the launchers which are used to fire those ballistic missiles, have gone down considerably, but Iran still has a formidable number of ballistic missiles
That's
to
the
continue
information.
this
That's
war of
the
attrition that it's
independent
been fighting.
assessment. Sandeep, I'll come back to you 4 more, but I've run out of time on this part of the show. How will Iran respond? Do keep in mind, Iran is also a civilizational state. It has an army, it has intelligence agencies, it has forces that can, and as of now, they continue to strike at a place and time of their choosing. 10th day of the operation, and they fired their Khyber Shikan hypersonic missile at Israel. So will they escalate in the days ahead? Will they close down the Strait of Hormuz? What would that mean?